Let's talk about the weekend's football action. The main focus of good quality stuff happens to involve a bunch of the more interesting Ulster teams, and Cahair O'Kane of the Irish News is with us. Good morning to you, Cahair. How's it going?
Morning, Tyrone. How's things?
Yeah, pretty good. Come here. You've been arguing with a bunch of Donegal people on Twitter overnight, following your article yesterday, when you were saying that Declan Bonner alone can't rid Donegal of their defensive mindset. Is he trying to rid them of a defensive mindset, or is he trying to just make sure that the defence is solid, but that they also make use of the glittering array of attacking talent they have?
Well, this is it. I suppose he is. Definitely, Donegal have had attacking players, and to be fair to Rory Gallagher, I know he's probably back in the spotlight, having set Fermanagh up the way he did last week, but in fairness to him, in his couple of years in Donegal, he actually started the process of bringing them out of this and sort of recognised, as you say, the wealth of attacking talent you have. You look through their forward line, and I don't think, even before Ulster started this year, I don't think there would have been anybody.
Oh. There you go. Bit of an issue there with the line.
Is that some of those Donegal Twitter people having hacked his feed, I wonder? He
had some great stats, actually, in his piece, talking about the Donegal Club Championship. The average score per team in the Donegal Club final since 2005 is 1-7.
Oh, my God.
1-5 was enough for Gweedore against Unions in 06. 09 took Unions to glory in 2014. 1-7 was enough for them in 2012. And Glen Swilly won in 2011 by hitting 1-8.
Maybe they played 10 minutes a half and we just don't know it.
Yeah, because the weather's so bad. It's like, here, get out there, do the 10 minutes, off you come.
Exactly. They never get an hour of good weather in Donegal, so that's it. That's definitely the explanation for that.
My favourite story about the weather in Donegal was from Brendan Devaney, who was like, look, one of the pitches that we played on, if you kind of kicked the ball past the end line, it was into the Atlantic, so, that's why we had that close hand passing style and good quality control. I think we got Cahair back. How are you doing?
Getting there.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, you were saying that if you look through their forward line, they've got some really brilliant talent.
Brilliant talent. Some of the best. You look at their ability to kick long range scores, which is going to be kind of crucial as they go through the rest of Ulster. I would imagine Down will try and set up quite deep against them, and Fermanagh will set up very deep against them if it is Donegal in the Ulster finals. So the like of Murphy, Kieran Thompson, or McNeilis, even Paddy McBrearty, if he comes out a bit, they can all kick points from beyond the blanket, and that's something that Tyrone don't have, and it's something that Monaghan don't have. So they are the best attacking force in Ulster, and I suppose Declan Bonner recognised that and wanted to sort of utilise that better than maybe Rory Gallagher and Jim McGuinness both had.
Yeah. How's he doing it though? So it's not just long range point scoring as well, because it's a brilliant running game.
Absolutely. I suppose he struggled initially to find the balance between defence and attack, because in the early stages of the National League they were too open, and they were very much wanting to play man for man, and they found that they just kind of couldn't do it. And I don't think any team can do it as such, just play blatantly man for man football. But they've developed a wee bit as the tail end of the league has come, and I suppose they're still not. That's the thing about them; they're still not quite there yet, because even though they scored 220 and 216 in their two games in Ulster, which is big scoring, they conceded 115 and not 16, and both Cavan and Derry kicked 13 wides each. So there's still work to be done, and in terms of going into the Super 8 or wherever they end up, they're probably not the defensive package that they need to be, which is almost ironic in terms of Donegal. But as you say, that the long range point taking is one thing, but they have just such a pace from deep that Ryan McHugh always existed, and Hugh McFadden is now coming on to a bit of ball and playing. You have Owen Ban Gallagher, who has come through and has had a brilliant year, playing sort of weeks cornerback, weeks wing halfback. He's attacking. They're trying to implement this Dublin idea of keeping players wide and coming in off and running at angles. But I suppose it'll only be tested when it comes to Croke Park, how well they've mastered the balance of it.
Have you noticed a shift, Cahair, in Declan Bonner's approach to Gaelic football at all? Because obviously he was famously criticised with his under-21 team and being worse than the Black Death, which was in relation to that Cavan under-21 team. Like, how has he evolved to the point now where we're all lauding him as an attacking master plan initiator?
Well, in fairness to Declan, he has defended himself against that, and I can see why. You know, I don't really understand where that came from either. Having seen that Donegal under-21 team, you know, in their final 2 games in Ulster last year, they kicked 3-17 in each of them. Which, you know, the Black Death doesn't kick 3-17. So, you know, that was kind of always a wee bit false. Now, the minor team he had maybe 3 or 4 years ago, he got to an All-Ireland final, and then he took a side that was strong favourites going on to Ulster, back into the minors the following year, and they got a bit of a shock from Derry, and they were probably playing a defensive style at that stage. But I think, you know, he evolved fairly quickly with the game, and by the time he took those 2 under-21 teams, I don't think that criticism was fair at all, and I don't think it's any grand change in his plan over the last 6 or 8 months. I think it's been a 2 or 3 year process for him.
So one of the things that is kind of a hallmark of the Ulster campaign so far is that everybody assumes largely that Monaghan are going to win, and so it's all about Monaghan, what they're going to do and the evolution of them and whether or not they're realistic semi-final contenders, and then all of a sudden it's Fermanagh coming through and going, ooh, is there any prospect that Down can do what Fermanagh did last week and actually make us all go, ooh, we should have been talking a bit more about Down in the build-up to this game?
Well, anybody remembers last year's Ulster semi-final, they beat Monaghan out of absolutely nowhere. You know, they had a poor Division 2 campaign and came to Armagh with, you know, rated as no hopers. I think Monaghan beat them by 12 or 13 points the year previous, and all anybody was talking about was Down kind of achieving a better level of respectability. And of course they came out and flattened Monaghan that day. And the thing about Down is they're a side that could trouble Donegal, because Donegal, as we said, will give any team chances. You know, they are conceding chances, and Down have forwards, and they have, you know, I always look at Down and think they're less than the sum of their parts sometimes, because they have, you go through their 15 and they have some serious footballers, and they just obviously they produced it against Monaghan last year, but they don't produce it as often as they probably should. And so they are a side that, you know, everybody talks about the gander getting up and down. When they get about a bit of momentum in a game, they're very, very hard to stop. And that would be the same, you know, if they got a run on Donegal and got themselves into a lead and got a bit of momentum in the game, they would be, you know, they'd be a serious, serious force.
Just on that point that Ger was making there about Monaghan kind of falling flat at the weekend against Fermanagh, you were making the point in the Irish News as well this week that win actually shows why nobody from Ulster will win the All-Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I can't give anything but praise and credit to Fermanagh, because that's the way they had to set up to win that game. You know, they're coming into Division 3. They know they don't have the attacking arsenal to go toe-to-toe with pretty much anybody. And Rory Gallagher, you know, the system that he put in place and the work rate that he got out of those players and the way that they went about their business on Sunday was just, you know, I know it's not particularly attractive, but it was absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure Fermanagh don't care, but they are the reason, because, you know, Monaghan and Tyrone, both, if anybody watched them during the National League, they would have seen both teams wanting to kick the ball more. Like, Tyrone set their stall out this year to play with 2 men up front the whole time. And Monaghan, like, I saw Monaghan twice in the early weeks of the league playing with 3 up front, playing with 3 men inside. But the reality is that there's no point in doing that if you meet a setup like Fermanagh's on Sunday. And even like Monaghan and Tyrone were a bit scared of each other and kind of both set up the same way, so it became a running game that day as well. Fermanagh, you know, you weren't going to kick the ball through that wall of green shirts, and you had to try and run it. Obviously Fermanagh were set up for that and met the runners brilliantly, but because no team in Ulster then is coming through the Ulster Championship kicking the ball frequently enough and working on that style of play, then they're getting to Croke Park, and as we've seen in the last couple of years when Ulster teams have gone to Croke Park, they've struggled so badly because they're very deep and defensive. and they don't use the foot pass enough on the counter-attack, and they're trying to run the ball 140 yards.
There was a minute at the start of the second half, maybe 5 minutes in, where a long ball was finally pinged into Conor McManus. He turned and swivelled, and it just went wide. And instead of them doing it again to allow him to find his range, it was like, well, that didn't work. He just kicked it wide off it. And you were like, it made perfect sense to keep going.
Well, I think maybe, it's the players will make decisions based on what they see in front of them, and that was probably a rare occasion when Fermanagh hadn't got a double or triple sweeper in front of him. Conor McManus obviously stays inside. Monaghan very, very seldom bring him out, and that might have been the way forward for Monaghan, to bring him into the half forward line and try and get him on ball, because he's able to kick points from that bit further out. But the idea of them kicking ball, they were only going to be kicking it down. It had to be absolutely inch perfect past 2 or 3 sweepers, and obviously Shea Cullen had a good handle on McManus as well in terms of the man for man job. So it was going to be a serious ask to kick a ball to Conor McManus, and I suppose they were just set up to run, and the problem was that they didn't have any energy in the running game, and the amount of times Monaghan ran into tackles with single runners, and it was so uncharacteristic of them. Like, I remember Desi Ward carrying a ball into 5 men in the middle of the Fermanagh goal, and absolutely no support, nobody near him. He actually got a shot away and put it wide, but he was completely off balance, and it was just that was the kind of thing Monaghan were doing all day, and it was so unlike them, but it was so much as well down to what Fermanagh did, and you can only praise them for it.
Your lead story in the back of the Irish News this morning is about Gavin Devlin talking about the fringe players in Tyrone needing to step up. Just how many of them do we actually expect to be forced into action at the weekend, and how serious is the injury crisis? I'm minded of the Waterford hurling injury crisis, which all of a sudden kind of dissipated in the middle of last week, and suddenly Austin Gleeson's back, Park Brownie's back. Like, is this something similar, Tyrone, or Portmouth in this just a little bit?
Well, I think the issue with Tyrone is not so much the number of injuries. It's that the injuries have all occurred in the one place where they can't really afford them. Mark Bradley's done ankle. I think it's ankle ligaments. He's out for a few weeks. Lee Brennan's done his hamstring again. I think he's gone for 8 weeks. Darren McCurry left the panel earlier in the year, and those, Tyrone probably only had 4 recognised inside forwards on the panel, and that's 3 of them gone. So it's a crisis in that sense. In that, Conor McAlliskey is now probably the only, the only designated inside forward that they have on the squad, and they might end up, pushing Cahill McKeon inside or trying to find some way around that. Obviously they'll probably set up to play the usual running game anyway, and maybe not utilise the inside forward that much as it is. But it's Peter Hart's a significant loss as well, obviously suspended from the Monaghan game for a late strike. But it's not, Tyrone were regarded within Ulster as having the depth, over the last few years to cope with pretty much anything, and there still is. Ironically, I'm not sure that there's a huge depth there defensively in terms of what they could change. In terms of a back, certainly there are 3 fullbacks. They're probably a bit like there, but in that middle third, they have a lot of options. And I don't think they've called in Rory Sludden, brother Niall Sludden, on the panel, but I don't think you'll see Rory thrown straight into action or anything like that. It's not that severe a crisis. There are plenty of options before him, and he'll probably, like, the fringe players that we're talking about, the players that he'd probably introduce, have all had a bit of championship experience. I don't think we'll see anything too fresh or too new.
What do you think is the biggest reason, Cahair, that we have this perception, and it is a perception that manifests itself in reality, that Tyrone just don't have the forwards to compete with the big teams? Is it the talent coming through, or is the talent there and they're being inhibited by a game plan? Well,
I suppose everybody read Sean Kavanagh's comments over the last few weeks, and Gavin Devlin had a cut back at him in the Irish News last week, and I suppose, to be honest, I would probably fall on Gavin Devlin's side of the argument, in that the players that Sean Kavanagh listed as potentially coming through, Darren McCurry was the one out of the 4 who really made a shape out of it, and probably Darren McCurry got the rawest deal of anybody. He was I think he's the 6th top scorer currently playing in Ulster, and yet Mickey Hart hadn't. I don't think he'd started him in a game in 2 years, and he used him off the bench. So I can see why he was frustrated, and I can see the argument stacking up with him, in that respect. But in terms of the rest of it, I honestly think that Mickey Hart gets a lot of criticism for the style of play, and sometimes the Dublin game last year, they just didn't come out early enough, and the game was gone inside 10 minutes and they had to come out there. They didn't come out till half time, and by that stage it was no hope. But I think the style of play that he has kind of masks the fact that they just don't have a squad of players that will win in All Ireland at present, and I think it maybe does get the best out of them. You saw what Dublin did to them when their defence was left a wee bit exposed last year, man for man. At times they just couldn't cope. They were overrun, and the defensive thing gives them that bit of cover. They have they have serious legs and pace on the break, so it's a style of play that does suit. And there's nobody like Lee Brennan was the clamour, if you like. He was the one forward in Tyrone club football that people would have said could make a difference. And all right, it took Mickey Hart a while to give him the opportunity, but he did. And outside of that, there's nobody jumping out at you in Tyrone club football at the minute that you're saying, he's scoring a bagful in club games. He should be playing inside for the county. There's just not that depth of scoring options there.
A quick question about Derry and Kildare. This game's on in Owen Begg. Derry aren't favourites for this, but really they should be, because they're the team who has a little bit of something about them against the Kildare team who are in tailspin.
Probably fair enough. I would say Derry took more from the Donegal game than they lost, because even within the county there weren't an awful lot giving them any chance of anything, and people were probably happy if they avoided a hammering, and they did. It was a respectable performance considering all the length of time that Damien McArlean had his full squad together to kind of put a game plan. Obviously there were holes in that, and defensively they had big numbers back, but they weren't. You compare them to how Fermanagh were structured last week and how they knew where Monaghan were going to run and what they were going to do, whereas Derry were just kind of numbers back and try and frustrate Donegal whatever way we can. So it's a bit of a work in progress for them, but I would say they'll be a bit more confident now than they were 3 weeks ago. And Kildare, as you say, are just coming in off just a horrendous run. Like I was at the Leinster final last year where they played Dublin, and I really thought that here's a side that is coming and might challenge, and the wheels have just completely fallen off. I not close enough to know why exactly. Obviously, I've seen the headlines about Cian O'Neill and why that has happened, but it strikes me that they're coming to Derry, like I say, that just wants the year to be over. Why
is the game in Owen Begg instead of Celtic Park? What's the benefit and thinking behind that?
Well, it's the first game in Owen Begg. It's the first time Derry have played in Owen Begg in 18 months, because the pitch has been closed since last August, September, I think, since the club championship semi-finals for remedial work, which was, strange that it's a fairly new pitch. It's only about 4 or 5 years old, and it needed to be closed for 8 or 9 months already. But I think it's ready to go again now, and it is. Derry got 400 and 500 at 2 of their National League games in Celtic Park. It's not happy place in terms of supporters. They don't like going there. It's a long way from the hub of football in Derry, and Owen Begg is right in there's a standing stone at Owen Begg that is the very centre of County Derry, so there could be no more central point, so it's a better venue for it. Alright,
good stuff, Cahair. Enjoy the weekend. Thanks a million.
No, thanks, Naz.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm worried.
Q-Tour, Ger Gilroy absolutely lambasts Kildare in tactical move to downplay expectations in home county is what I see as the headline on offtheball.com a little bit later on.
There you go. But they're just a team in free fall at the moment, and it's hard to arrest that. This is it in terms of this current management, unfortunately. Like, I think that they should have been doubling down at the start of the year and saying, look, whatever happens in Division 1, this is the management team we're going to stick with. We've decided that this is the group, but Kildare has had this kind of churn over the last number of years where since the putsch against McGeaney, and then Jason Ryan came in really on a hiding to nothing, and now they've decided halfway through this year, it's like, we couldn't keep our Division 1 status, he's got to go, is the rumblings. It's like it makes no sense, you know?
It would have been a great fixture 10 years ago, Derry versus Kildare. Like, a bad draw in the second round of the qualifiers would mean elimination for whoever wins this game anyway, so I hate to be grim about a game, but...
Yeah, although, you could see either of these two teams putting a bit of a run together.
Yeah, but they need to get lucky draws.
There's loads of lucky draws, though.
Yeah, you don't need a lot of luck to proceed to round 3 of the qualifiers.
Yeah.
It's round 4 really when you're kind of like, it's not fish in a barrel anymore in terms of the draw. Like Tyrone or Meath, like Tyrone are going to win that game. Like despite what we've heard from our producer earlier on, that Meath are definitely going to win that game. Donegal are going to win. So like you've got down in the qualifiers along with Tyrone. You've got 2 plucky Ulster opposition there, potentially Derry as well. Like it is a bit of a, it's, when I say fish in a barrel, it's not exactly fish in a barrel. It's not like an easy win like round 1 of the qualifiers. Like your Leitrim's and your Londons are done.
Yeah.
So there's no guaranteed bankers of Kildare, which, like, to be fair, Kildare need at the moment. They need a bit of a tomato can, and Derry ain't a tomato can.
Derry away is not.
No.
And like the difference between a Derry team in the league and a Kildare team in the league looks very pronounced, but then the difference between Carlow and Kildare, it turns out, wasn't pronounced, because at least, Derry don't have that real sense of momentum that Carlow did, but at the same time, you would definitely be concerned about that. I don't, like, I see Tommy has that confidence about this Meath team and what they might be able to do, and again, being at home, like, I don't see that as being a straightforward Tyrone win with all the stuff that's going on at the moment.
No, definitely not. That's going to be a contest right up to the 60th minute, but Tyrone surely have too much at the back and in midfield for this Meath team to score enough to actually win this game once it gets to the 70th odd minute. I don't think Meath have the legs in that department, in the forward department. I know that's Tyrone's problem as well, ironically, when it comes to scoring. I think that's going to let Meath down just because of how strong Tyrone are at the back. Let's not forget that this is still a team that we were tipping for. Some people were tipping for All-Ireland final last year. Let's not forget how excited we were for Dublin against Tyrone last year. So that can't all have been misplaced.
Well, it turns out. It was complete nonsense.
But
the evidence of our eyes suggests that was a complete nonsense, that those two teams are not in any way close to each other, and not tactically, not technically, not strength in depth, not breadth of ambition, not style of play. Those two teams are not close to each other.
No, I guess not.
But can you make the case that it will be within 10 points if they were to meet tomorrow in a proper championship match?
Well, definitely not. Like, Tyrone have disimproved since last year, especially with the list of injuries they have. Like Cahair talks about there, and I know we've had a pop at the Tyrone management earlier on in the show, but they are right. I would probably fall down on their side as well, similar to Cahair, in the idea of the talent not being available. They just don't have outrageously good scoring forwards. All they need is one Conor McManus.
Yeah.
Not to win an All-Ireland, but to be back to where they were maybe before the Dublin game last year, when we're talking about them as potential All-Ireland contenders. But like it's.
But there are no Conor McManuses really. Most counties don't have them, so you need a style of play that's going to free your forwards up and give them the opportunity to score, and they don't have that.
Yeah, I say they need one Conor McManus. Like, producing a Conor McManus is easy, or it happens every single year with a decent minor or something. No, he's an outrageous talent. There's no question about it. Like you look at somebody like Stephen O'Neill, probably doesn't have as much talent as Conor McManus, but was more effective than Conor McManus on the biggest stage.
Stephen O'Neill was sensational. He probably does have the same amount of talent as Conor McManus. Like, you could still make the case that Stephen O'Neill did it in bigger games.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Like, he 100% did it in bigger games. He did it in All-Ireland finals. Like, he was a player of the year. There's no question that he was. Yeah,
I'd say that
like he was a more effective footballer.
If we're playing a match for my life, I'm still probably taking Stephen O'Neill.
Yeah, so am I. But that doesn't mean he's got more talent than Conor McManus.
All right, let's move on. We're going to